Turn the page, live your life every day. Don't let anybody stand in your way.
Hey, Mike Foster here. We got it's another episode of Whatcha Reading. I'm going to talk about books I've been reading, fiction and non-fiction, over the last several months. And let's just get right to it. I hope you like to read. Well, I guess I'm not getting right to it. I read every day, morning, noon, night. Try to read, 50, 60, 70, 80 books a year, whatever I can get through, depending on how busy I am. But I always make time to read, and you should too. It's the greatest thing in the world. All right, let's get to it. The first book is a book by John Burdett, and it's called Bangkok Hunts. And it's a continuing series about a detective in Bangkok. His name is Sanji Jiplejip. Jiplejip. He's a devout Buddhist of the Royal Thai Police, and he solves crimes. He's also did Bangkok 8 and Bangkok Tattoo, and it's a great series. It gets into the geography of and the history of Thailand and Bangkok especially. And I enjoy, going to different countries through reading, because I probably will never travel there, never get to Bangkok, but by reading and by watching movies and documentaries about it. This is a mystery. It's about, of course, it's a murder mystery. It's a whodunit, and he tracks us down. He goes all across. He goes into Cambodia. He goes into Laos. Goes all around the different countries in that area. And it's called Hunts because the folks here are very, very superstitious and believe in the afterlife quite a bit, and with ghosts and things like that. But it's not a supernatural book. It's a mystery, and it's worth reading. Bangkok Hunts, John Burdett. All right. Now on the fiction side, this was a great book. It was called The Rise of the Rocket Girls, and this was a book this is by Nathalia Holt, and it's about the women who propelled us from missiles to the moon to Mars. And it takes place back in the early, it wasn't even called the space race. They were trying to figure out, they were human computers, actually. The women worked computing things, computating. So women who were really good at math and had had the ability to do all these numbers and work with numbers, they would hire them. They seemed that women did better than men in this, and this went all the way back into World War II, and they were basically human computers, and that evolved into what became NASA eventually. And this is a story about a group of women that continued to rise and work in the field of, I guess, rocket-propelled missions that eventually went up to the moon, went up to Mars, went up to the Hubble spacecraft, all the way up there. And it was through, it's very interesting about what these women did and how important they were to the history of America, especially, space travel. And it's fascinating. The Rise of the Rocket Girls, Nathalia Holt. Check that one out. Now here's an old one. Richard North Patterson has been around for a long time. He's written, dozens of books. This one's called No Safe Place. This is the first, and this book's about 20 years old, and it's a political novel. In fact, this book's like 24 years old, and what got me was all the issues that they talk about in this book 24 years ago are almost exactly the same issues we talk about in today's society. Abortion, gun control, the economy, everything that they're running for president for now are the same issues we had then. And they even talk about mass shootings 24 years ago, that we need to figure out a way to stop them. We haven't done anything. They've even gotten worse, not to get political right now. But this is the story of a political candidate whose brother was assassinated, similar to the Kennedys, but they're not the Kennedys. And he's running, and it takes you behind the scenes in his campaign and all the things that happened before that, his life growing up, how it affected him, and the future of where he's moving as a candidate as president of the United States. It's a fascinating look at issues that affected the world back then and still affect us now, and a fascinating behind-the-scenes look at running a campaign. This is the first of 3 novels with these same characters. I can't wait to read the next one. Richard North Patterson, No Safe Place. Now here's a great book by James Patterson. I guess I did back-to-back Pattersons. But James Patterson, everyone knows James Patterson. He's written over 50 books, 70 books. This guy writes about Alex Cross. He writes all kinds of books, and he has a lot of ghostwriters that write with him. This is called The Last Days of John Lennon. He wrote this book about a year and a half ago, and it's exactly what it is. First of all, it follows the whole history of John Lennon from the beginning of the Beatles and his home life, and then all the way up until he eventually moved to New York and lived in the Dakota, where eventually he was murdered outside his hotel, or the apartments where he lived there with Yoko. And it talks about the idiot who followed him and tracked him down, and for some reason had in his mind that he needed to kill John, which is horrible. But it's a fascinating read, and it's also very historically sound, and it talks about how the Beatles got together and John, and how he, his life all the way up to the end of it. It's a good read. Of course, we know how it all ends, and it's sad, but it's worth reading. The Last Days of John Lennon, James Patterson. Now here's a fiction book. This is from Tim Powers. This is called Alternate Routes, or Alternate Routes, however you want to pronounce it. I think it's Alternate Routes, R-O-U-T-E-S. Tim Powers. Now, Tim Powers is a Southern California science fiction, fantasy, surrealist, magic realism, whatever you want to call it. I actually met him in a bookstore in Southern Cal like 30 years ago. I've actually seen him speak about writing, because I dabble in writing, and I've been to a lot of lectures, and he's a cool customer. But this book is really, really good. It takes place in Southern California, and the alternate routes, it's the ghosts of the freeway are rising. Well, if you take a certain turn off a certain freeway in Southern California, you can go into a futuristic world where strange things happen that affect what happens in real time, on Earth. It's science fiction, of course, or fantasy, and it goes back and forth, but it's certainly worth reading. And this is the first of 2 other books. It's a trilogy. I've read several of his other books. It's good to get away from just mysteries or nonfiction or any other kind of literature, and take a walk on the fantasy side. Tim Powers, pick up his other books, but this one was worth it. Alternate Routes. And then lastly, another nonfiction book. This is a sports book. It's sports and humor. This is from Rick Riley. He was a big writer for Sports Illustrated. This one's called Who's Your Caddy? Rick is funny, but he's also a very good writer, investigative sports reporter. Now, Who's Your Caddy is a simple concept, but he actually went out and did it. He chose certain famous people or celebrities and athletes and caddy for them for a round, and it took a lot to convince a lot of people to go with him. And he acted just like a regular caddy. None of them were playing tournaments where they would lose money, because Rick is not a professional caddy. But then he wrote about doing it, and some of the folks that he caddied for were John Daly, Donald Trump. Now this was back, I think, well before Trump thought that he wanted to be a president, and people still found him humorous. Yeah, this is 20 years ago. He caddied for Donald Trump, a couple of professionals, David Duval, John Daly, of course, Jack Nicklaus he caddied for, Deepak Chopra, Bob Newhart, the comedian, and a blind golfer named Bob Andrews. And it's fascinating that a blind guy could actually play golf better than me and you. Very funny, very humorous, very insightful. Rick Riley, Who's Your Caddy? Read Rick. He wrote for Sports Illustrated for years. He might still be writing for them, and he's very insightful, but very, very, very funny. So that's what I'm reading. That's a bunch. Of course, I've read quite a few more books than this. Love to hear about what you're reading, and leave comments. Tell people about this series. Check out all my other ones. I have over a dozen of What You're Reading, and I hope you like this series. I love it because I love talking about books. I love reading books. I love writing books. I love collecting books. Other than that, I don't like books. So check out the rest of my videos at Live Life 365 and all the social medias, and keep living life 365, but especially keep reading. Until next time, peace.
Live life 365.
Excuse me.